Greetings, everyone. I want to welcome folks to our webinar focused on recruiting, hiring, and retaining educators of color. This is part one in a two-part conversation that we are hosting focused on the recruitment, hiring, and retention of educators of color. The second one will be posted with the Center for Black Educator Development, so do please be on the lookout for that. Today, I'm Saroja Warner, the Director of Talent Development and Diversity at WestEd, and I'm joined by my colleagues at the Connecticut State Department of Education, Shawana Tucker, the Chief Talent Officer, and Christopher Todd, the Bureau Chief for the Talent Office at the Connecticut State Department of Ed. And Shawana and Chris, I've had the wonderful opportunity over the last year to work closely with them on their educator diversity efforts. And we're really excited to have them share with the group the work that they've been doing, some of the successes, some of the challenges, and most importantly, be able to have some conversation as they offer guidance, I think, at the end of our time together to folks across the state of Pennsylvania and in other places in our country as you continue to work to drive educator diversity. Our goal for this session is really to provide the audience of practitioners and probably policymakers as well with innovative practices, tools, and resources related to recruiting, hiring, and retaining teachers of color. For our agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reason why educator diversity is important in Pennsylvania, sort of the landscape right now in the state, and the research base for why. We are going to then spend the second part of our webinar today hearing from our colleagues in Connecticut about the work that they've been doing, and then have some conversation at the end. So just to share a little bit about Pennsylvania's context is some data here. In 2017, 2018, 6.4% of all teachers in the state were teachers of color. 11% of first-year teachers were teachers of color, and 44% of students were students of color. Additionally, 24.8% of bachelor's degree recipients in the state were people of color. Now, that's 2017, 2018 data. It's likely not very different if we were to look at more current data sets. It probably hasn't shifted very much since then. For comparison, though, the year prior, 2016, 2017, 24.8% of bachelor degree recipients in Pennsylvania were teachers of color. So in that particular category, no shift has happened in 1 year. I will say that as we think about our current context under the pandemic and some of the challenges that higher ed institutions have experienced with enrollment, that teachers are facing in school districts that have been pretty much virtual for the last 10 months. What we are seeing a trend nationwide, and is likely the case in Pennsylvania, is there are a lot of teachers of color, teachers and teachers of color that did not come back this fall, or that are anticipating leaving the profession this year for a variety of reasons. And whenever we have challenges with teacher shortages, whether it's in the recruitment side, the hiring side, or in the retention side, when we disaggregate the data by race, we find that those challenges are even more of an impact for our teachers of color. They're more adverse on teachers of color. PDE recognizes that recruiting and hiring educators is also much more challenging in particular areas of the state. As you can imagine, in rural areas, it is much more of a challenge. And this is something that I think they share in common with our presenters who are going to talk today in Connecticut, where in rural areas of the state, it is also more of a challenge. But in Pennsylvania, as the state and ed prep programs work to diversify their pipeline and their candidate pool, We want to support local school districts in retaining diverse educators. Why should we focus on hiring teachers of color? So I'm not going to assume I'm preaching to the choir, which I often do these days on this particular topic. I think it is important to make sure that folks understand that there is not only a research base for why we should be doing this that connects to student achievement and student success generally, but there's also a moral imperative for why we should be focusing on increasing our educators of color in our workforce. We know that all students benefit from a diverse teacher workforce. As students prepare to enter an increasingly diverse society, exposure to teachers from different racial and ethnic backgrounds is really important in their early years, particularly as they learn about and sort of contest stereotypes that exist. Having a more diverse workforce helps students become more comfortable with people that are different from them, from in terms of race, but also in terms of their background. And it can really help to reduce the implicit and unconscious biases that I think we're just socialized into at very young ages in this country. Students of color in particular benefit from a diverse teacher workforce. Teachers of color are less likely to discipline or expel students of color and are more likely to identify students of color for gifted programs. They tend to have higher academic expectations for students of color, which can result in increased academic and social growth for students of color. Higher academic achievement has also been linked to students being taught by same-race teachers, particularly for low-performing Black students. And students of color benefit from having teachers of their own race and ethnic background who serve as academically successful role models and who tend to have greater knowledge of students' cultural heritage. Students with same-race teachers also tend to have significantly fewer absences and suspensions and tend to have more favorable perceptions of their teachers. Furthermore, minority teachers can be more motivated to work with disadvantaged minority students in high poverty, racially and ethnically segregated schools, which may help reduce rates of teacher attrition in hard to staff schools. That said, I need to just do a course correction because I don't want to start this recording over. I use the word minority, and that is because I want to call that out because the research that is published, there's a lot of research that is still using the term minority as they talk about students of color. And that is not the language that I believe the PDE has adopted. They don't talk about minority students. We talk about students of color, and we talk more explicitly about race by naming students as Black, as Latinx, as, you know, Asian American, and so on. And that is also the case for the Connecticut State Department of Education. So I do want to sort of call out and acknowledge the differences in language among researchers and even across, I think, our landscape of SEAs and LEAs and data collection tools and how we use language. Okay, so I want to transition next in our conversation here to have our guests, Dr. Shawana Tucker and Christopher Todd, talk a little bit about their work in Connecticut. And Shawana, I think you're going to go first.
Yes, I am. And thank you, Saroja, for your warm introduction and for the opportunity to share information with the audience today. Um, our first slide, diversity on the rise. In 2008, 35.5% of the student population were students of color. In 2019-2020 in Connecticut, that percentage of students of color has risen to nearly 47%. Although the diversity of Connecticut's educators is on the rise, currently at 9.6% for the 2019-2020 school year, it has not kept pace with the diversity of the student population. So the Connecticut State Department of Education has committed to addressing this gap by setting an ambitious goal with a call to action for the State Department of Education, districts, and other educational partners to strategically design and implement recruitment plans that will help to collectively achieve this goal. The State Board of Education's 5-year comprehensive plan, ensuring equity and excellence for all Connecticut students, is a primary driver. The Talent Office's goal is to recruit, support, and retain great teachers and leaders with a focus on increasing racial, ethnic, and linguistic diversity. Our problems to solve are as follows: build bridges to attract and retain top talents to serve in Connecticut schools and districts through our RESC MTR Alliance, MTIP grant, and Special Act 16-10. Use recruitment, the educator evaluation and support system, and professional learning practices to develop and enhance the talent pipeline of diverse, highly effective educators. Provide culturally responsive instruction through a deliberate focus on the instructional skills and wisdom required to meet the individual needs of students. Transform educator preparation programs. Recruit, develop, and retain highly effective school principals through high-quality pre-service training, induction programs, and continuous development opportunities. Statutes are also drivers for all of us. Section 1.8, monitor, advise, support, and intervene in, when necessary, local and regional boards of education's efforts to prioritize minority teacher recruitment and develop innovative strategies to attract and retain minority teachers within their districts. Section 1.9a, include a question regarding demographic data of applicants for positions requiring educator certification in the department's annual hiring survey as of 7/1/19. And Section 1.9b, submit a report on the applicant demographic data collected to the Joint Standing Committee of the General Assembly, July 1st, 2020.
Thank you, Dr. Tucker, and thank you again, Saroja, for hosting us this morning. My name is Chris Todd. I'm the Bureau Chief in the Talent Office, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone today. In the Talent Office, we've developed this graphic to illustrate an educator's career continuum and really use it to work to align our strategies, resources, and projects along the various stages of the continuum. As we examined CSDE resources, strategies, and actions already in place, we recognize the need to build tools and resources, specific to the hiring and selection practices to assist district teachers and leaders to re-examine what has historically been kind of a business as usual approach in Connecticut schools. As a result of this focus, the guidebook, which was published last fall and is available on the CSDE website, has been promoted and piloted throughout the 2019-20 academic year with several Connecticut school districts. The guidebook was developed as a result of a 4-part workshop series created in collaboration with the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders, the Northeast Comprehensive Center, and several Connecticut Opportunity Districts in 2018. The guidebook and companion resources is intended to support districts in the development and implementation of a plan to attract, recruit, and hire and select educators of color per the requirements outlined in Public Act 1834, which Dr. Tucker spoke about on an earlier slide. We're excited to continue our technical assistance to pilot districts this year through our partnership with WestEd. The guidebook and the accompanying resources was designed and developed to align with a continuous improvement process methodology. This included the following key beliefs. We believe that the conditions necessary for selecting and hiring a diverse educator workforce are both universal and contextually specific. Regardless of the context, a targeted data gathering analysis, problem identification, needs assessment process, goal setting, and evaluation with evidence-based cycle for continuous improvement is imperative. Unique to each school district, there will be a degree to which certain conditions do or do not exist. And as a result, the root causes for any gaps in conditions necessary for successful selection and hiring of a diverse educator workforce will vary across districts. Once districts have identified strategies to address these gaps, we believe that teams can use the resources provided for action planning, implementation, and ongoing assessment of progress. More specifically, this visual shows you at a glance some of the tools your hiring and selection committees will need to create a plan for diversifying your educator workforce. All of these tools are available in the appendices section of the CSDE guidebook for hiring and selection. Once districts have identified strategies to address gaps, teams can use the resources provided for action planning, implementation, and ongoing assessment. Each stage of the continuous improvement process provides districts and leaders with the opportunity and tools to better inform their decision-making. For example, in step 1, or inform, the highlighted Excel sheet is provided for districts to input and examine data. We have outlined some specific data points to consider collecting. However, there is an opportunity for districts to collect a variation from what we have suggested. As part of the guidebook, each resource also has a complementary set of guiding questions, such as what, if any, hiring data does your district currently collect? Do these data tell you what you need to know about the diversity of your educator workforce? And so forth. Additionally, we felt that it was important that the guidebook provides strategies and resources for districts to appropriately choose their entry point into this work. Where do you want to enter this work? The hiring and selection guidance tool will give districts sample strategies and accompanying resources to begin drafting their plans. For example, this tool is a companion to the culturally responsive self-assessment and integrates research and practices-based evidence with recommended strategies for informing culturally responsive hiring and selection strategies. We believe the continuous improvement process allows districts and leaders to develop and implement a comprehensive and coherent plan that addresses philosophy or theory of action, policy, structures, and practices at the local level. And finally, as with all continuous improvement cycles, the guidebook and accompanying resources help coach district leaders to evaluate data gathered through the process monitoring in an effort to determine the changes necessary in order to achieve desired results.
In addition to the upward trend in the overall percentage of educators of color within Connecticut's educator workforce, the Talent Office is pleased to show that efforts aimed at supporting districts with their own attraction, recruitment, and hiring practices and strategies are also showing gains. According to first-time employment data in our educator database system, districts are reporting from 2015 to 2016 to the 2019-2020 academic year, approximately 1,292 new educators of color have been hired across Connecticut. During the 2019-20 academic year, all first-time hired educators, those appearing in EDS for the very first time, showed that 16.5% of all new hires were educators of color. As we work during the 2020-21 academic year to partner with West Ed to continually provide technical assistance around the hiring and selection guidebook with several pilot districts, we also continue our work across the Talent Office continuum, including efforts to diversify the educator workforce that focus on cultivating an interest in teaching and ensuring that candidates find opportunities and success within our educator preparation programs. Two examples of initiatives dedicated to building stronger partnerships between our LEAs and Grow Your Own initiatives and our LEAs and EPP programs are Educators Rising and our Next Gen Educators program. During the month of September, we were pleased to launch our statewide Ed Rising initiative at New Britain High School with Governor Lamont and Commissioner Cardona. Developed by teachers for teachers with the generous support of the National Education Association, the AFT, and the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, Phi Delta Kappa International's Educators Rising program emphasizes fundamental professional practices that are critical for the next generation of aspiring teachers to develop and take their first steps on the path to realizing their full potential. The program, which includes curriculum, teacher training, and beginning to teach micro-credentials for students, is our centerpiece of a Grow Your Own teacher recruitment strategy. In-service teachers who aim to mentor and inspire high school students to teach in their own communities are critical to the program's success. EdRising has been awarded a grant from the Buck Foundation to implement the program in the 8 school districts listed on this slide in Connecticut during the 2020-21 school year. The grant has also allowed us to hire a part-time teacher leader in residence to assist with site management. Our teacher leader in residence is Sandy Fraioli and hails from New Britain. In an effort to make a commitment to student success and student-focused teaching and learning, the School of Education and Professional Studies at Central Connecticut State University is partnering with the Connecticut State Department of Education to create the Next Gen Educators program. The goal of the program is to enhance teaching innovation and teaching quality by bringing together a cohort of outstanding teacher candidates to foster excellence and rigor in the next generation of teachers while supporting K-12 student learning in Connecticut. The Next Gen program is currently open to undergraduate teacher candidates within the School of Education and Professional Studies. They are sophomores and juniors, and priority will be given to teacher candidates from underrepresented groups and students enrolled in shortage areas. The Next Gen program is designed to create enhanced learning environments for both the CCSU teacher candidate as well as K-12 students. Providing opportunities for our teacher candidates to work within school districts will enhance their own professional growth as well as positively impact student learning and achievement of all students. CCSU will provide students with several resources. The Connecticut State Department of Education will provide funding to cover the cost of student background checks and fingerprinting and provide professional mentors. We are collaborating with organizations such as Black Leaders and Administrators Consortium and CALUS, the Latino Administrators Consortium, to assist with providing professional mentors to each teacher candidate. CCSU provides a laptop for each teacher candidate, flexible coursework schedule, and a mentoring support. Our first district, Bristol Public Schools, has accepted 18 Next Gen educators into their school district. Each candidate will work with a certified teacher and will receive compensation for daily work aligned with rates of substitute teachers. This program will actually launch tomorrow in the state of Connecticut. Final thoughts.
Well, thank you, Christopher and Shawana, for this really insightful presentation, and congratulations. That's exciting that the way this webinar timed, that you're actually launching that work tomorrow. Congratulations on that. We have your contact information here that we want to make sure we share for folks. You've been generous enough to offer it for folks who want to follow up with Dr. Tucker and Christopher on the work that they're doing. These resources, the guidebook is available online for the public to consume and to use. And it is a really rich resource. So I encourage people to do that. We would like to engage in some conversation with you next. I don't know if we can just stop sharing and just see each other. You've been doing this work for some time now, given that when the legislation was acted, but even before legislation was acted, and like the focus and the priority of the talent office and at the CSDE. And I think our audience would be really interested in hearing from both of you some of your biggest takeaways and lessons that you've learned from doing this work. What are some of the things you've learned that could be helpful to practitioners and district leaders across Pennsylvania that are trying to do the same type of work?
Okay, I'll take a stab at it, Saroja. I'll start by saying that coming from a district or several districts prior to my position at the state, I think it behooves anyone, especially working in the area of talent or human resources, to really be creative, think outside the box, and assess your current systems that are in place to see if they're really offering you or providing you with what you need to attract diversity and recruit persons from diverse backgrounds to your district. And I'll provide an example. Many times we tend to just continue to move forward with the process and procedures, the day by day that have always been in place for, I'll just say, 100 years. And an example of that would be many of our districts within the state use the frontline AppleTrack system for when people apply for positions. And you can designate who will receive the applications, review them, et cetera. And a past practice has always been that those would go to a principal, they would develop their own committee, they would screen the applicants, interview, and then hire who they want and send that hiring recommendation to the actual central office to process. Well, in one of the districts that I worked in, we decided to change that process, not taking away the authority or the thoughts of the principal, because they're the one that is they're seeking to fill a vacancy in their school, but we opted to centralize the process. So the process, we turned it around. It began at central office. So we had a committee of 3 persons that would actually screen all of the applicants for that said position. And then we would provide a list of everyone who met the basic qualifications and those that we felt deserved an interview based on the posting. We then comprised a committee of the principal and several other key people who needed to be at the table. And it may not just be one principal, it may be several administrators, teacher, possibly a para, community member, partner. And we would then host the interview process at central office. And that way it would give not only that principal, but potentially another principal that had a very similar open vacancy at their school to then interview. We gained feedback, and then they could select who they felt would be the best fit for their school. We found that to be very helpful to us because it left us more in control of the process up front, as opposed to at the end just taking the name that was forwarded to us to hire. Because what we did see that we had many qualified applicants who previously in the former format would have been left out and not even been granted an interview. And so that is something that I encourage districts to do. Really look at the current processes and procedures that you have in place and really assess them to see if they are actually giving you or helping you to reach your goal to recruit, retain, and attract a diverse educator workforce.
And if I could just add on to Dr. Tucker, I think another thing to highlight to your point, Saroja, is, given that Dr. Tucker and I are relatively new at the CSDE, coming from district roles, a lot of this work, as you said, has been driven by regulatory or statutory, drivers, but some of the work was driven by CSDE leadership specifically. So our previous Chief Talent Officer, Dr. Sarah Barzy, and our previous Commissioner, Dr. Diana Wenzel, had the foresight to build this not only into the state's ESSA plan, but also into the 5-year strategic plan that Dr. Tucker referenced at the beginning of the presentation. And I think what that allowed us to do was to take talent office capacity and resources and seek external partners to really help us drive that work, because it was built into our strategic goal. So it wasn't a nice to do, for instance, add-on. It became part of our primary focus, that it was intentional, it was purposeful. And a lot of that was really driven early on by laying the foundation of what does this work need to look like to get results.
Yeah, I really appreciate you all sharing that piece too. I think it came up in the slide deck earlier about, despite the legislation and the sort of accountability measure that's in place, this was work that district leaders had already, and the department had prioritized, had found to be important and powerful, that you needed to do, just because that's how we advance educational equity, by having a more diverse workforce. And so I think it's a really great example to districts and states across the nation, and in Pennsylvania, about sort of leading and not being accountable, like sort of taking on a collective responsibility to do this work. And then letting the policies that come after serve as a way to support the good practice, right? As opposed to letting the policy lead here. And Connecticut's been a really great example of that. I really appreciate too, Shawana, what you shared about your own experiences in the district and about interrogating what in the handbook is referred to, the guidebook, as the hiring funnel. And really like interrogating all of the different points in that hiring funnel that a potential teacher to be hired goes through, and like where are the faults in that system that prevent us from having a more diverse workforce, and then like addressing them head on. That has been I think really interesting to learn from the districts themselves through our coaching project with the district teams as they interrogate those processes, what they're learning, and how they are attempting to sort of resolve those challenges. That said, I am interested in hearing from you all too, and I think our audience would be, as I would call you pioneers in this work, what are some of the cautions that you might offer to others listening and again wanting to do more in terms of increasing educator diversity? What are some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges? I would even say from your experiences, what are some of the pushback maybe you've heard so they can be best prepared to address those?
Yeah, I think one thing that jumps out is that, one of the missteps that the department took early on was there was too much emphasis on matching educator, breakdown percentages to student percentages. And what it did was in some ways, it empowered a lot of Connecticut districts to say, well, diversifying the educator workforce really isn't our challenge or our concern because our educator workforce matches our student enrollment data, right? And so I think it goes back to some of the research that you showed early on that one of the big beliefs that we've really tried to re-message is that we believe that the efforts to diversify the educator workforce are for the betterment of all students. And that I think that was something that early on we probably could have done better in terms of getting all districts to recognize that this is a collective effort as a state, and that this isn't just for districts that have a significantly higher enrollment of students of color. This is for all districts. So like we're in this together to kind of move this needle.
Yes, and to build upon what Chris just said, I'll take it back to a district perspective. I think for anyone in a district, it is critical that you have buy-in and support from all of your stakeholders. So the superintendent has to be vested totally and support the notion of why we must diversify our educator workforce for the betterment of all of our students, from the superintendent, not only to those within talent, your board, your administrators, your teachers. And sometimes it does not come as easily as you would like for it to do. So one of the things in one of the districts that I worked in, or actually two districts, we infused an entire series of professional development on cultural competency and training, because it was very, very critical for our administrators to understand the need for diversification of the teacher workforce, the para workforce. And that assisted us with the buy-in as to why we needed to change some of our practices and what the benefit would be in the long run. So don't think you can make the changes at central office without informing those in the field and at the building level, because you may not get immediate buy-in. So it's not something that can happen overnight, but you have to start someplace. But my point is, make sure that all of your stakeholders and your leadership and your board are on board with the plan that you are trying to move forward.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Dr. Tucker, because that was another question I wanted to ask both of you. What's one of the most impressive things about the guidebook that you all put together and are using with the districts is up front in the guidebook, this level setting around language and language use. I myself tripped up on language reading from my script in the beginning, but there's careful attention in the guidebook around the use of language, to the critical underpinnings, right, section of the guidebook, and the need to be able to address systemic inequities around race, to be able to address and call out bias, whether explicit or implicit. Just the idea that we all operate, and are influenced, by the symbols around us, the society around us, social reproduction that happens right in schools, and being able to acknowledge how our biases come into play, in this particular work around hiring practices, around school cultures that are important for retaining teachers, not just teachers of color, but I would say all teachers, right? But especially teachers of color. I would love to hear your thoughts, both of you. Dr. Tucker, I think it's fair to say you are identified as a woman of color, and Christopher, you identify probably as a white man, that you all represent a cross-racial team at the Connecticut State Department of Ed, and you are working with predominantly white educators, but in a lot of places, they have assembled cross-racial teams in their districts. Just would love to hear your experiences and insights around these critical conversations about race that not only just inevitably come up, but you actually push like they have to come up in this work.
I'll go first. I think it's, Saroja, your point is spot on. We felt that was a really important piece of the guidebook, and some of our driver for that in the guidebook is even within what you tripped up earlier, where we have legislation and statutes that specifically use the terminology minority teacher recruitment. And as a department and as an agency, we are purposefully moving away from that. And so our own internal challenges of trying to balance what reports we're putting out because they're based on statutory language that exists in the law, and we aren't able to necessarily change that easily, and then what really we feel is critical. But I think we tried to embed throughout each part of the resources that, we tell districts that, your entry into this work has to fit your context and fit where you are and where you are, that at the same time, you can't make the assumption that there isn't work to be done, and that all of us have work to do, whether it's implicit, whether it's explicit, but that if you're not willing to be open and honest and engage in some of those conversations, both comfortable and uncomfortable conversations, you're not going to shift the bar at the local level. It goes back to Dr. Tucker's point about making sure that all leadership, all stakeholders are committed, involved, and really understand what their role and what their piece is in this. And we really liked a lot of our tools, because we do feel that in some ways it's a safe opportunity for districts to gather some data that should open the door to some really open and honest conversations. When you look at what's our percentage of certified staff that are educators of color, what's our percentage of non-certified staff in the district, that are employees of color, and how do those two compare, and why? What are some of those driving reasons behind that? And it goes back to even some of what's the composition of our hiring committees, when we do have openings. To your point, if there's a district that's predominantly white educators, when they're pulling together an interview committee, are they trying to be reflective of their school community as a whole, or are they just pulling together what the grade 4 team particularly looks like to run the interview? So I think that, owning that up front, one in the document, was really important, but telling districts that they need to engage in this work, at the forefront and continuously throughout. It's not a one and done conversation.
Yes, it's an ongoing conversation. And I would say during my time at the department, Chris and I have worked very closely on the messaging of the work. Yes, while the legislation says MTR, minority teacher, we have moved away from that word. And so as we produce documents and share and discuss. Everything that we talk about is diversification of the educator pipeline and the educator workforce. So we focus on more diversification because I think when you use the word minority, excuse me, many people immediately, the mind will go to its race. When we talk about diversification, it opens the field to many other areas. And let's call it what it is. We have a shortage of males going into the field of education. Okay. So it's not just a racial perspective, it's also a gender issue, along with many other areas. From a district standpoint, you have to have those courageous conversations. And when we provided professional development to administrators, we had certain topics and we built in courageous conversations to assist them to address some of the biases that they faced, which are normal. We all have bias, no matter what your background is, but we had to have those courageous conversations if you really want to get down to moving this work forward. They have to be had, and they're very critical for moving the needle forward, and really much needed and overdue.
I appreciate both of you for being so candid and honest in these reflections. You know, a couple of things that I think as we close out this webinar that stand out for me from the work you're doing and from your comments today, you know, is that words matter, that bias is real, but bias does not have to be an obstacle in achieving our goals to increase the diversity of the educator workforce. And that at the end of the day, this work is important for every student in our system, for our white students, for our students of color. I'll even add, this is important for the health of the teacher workforce itself, right? That teachers benefit when they are in diverse settings with diverse colleagues. And so I want to thank both of you again tremendously. I also want to thank Andrea Browning, whose picture is on our screen. And so folks know Andrea was instrumental in putting this webinar together for us today. Thank you so much, Andrea, for your work and your efforts. Yes, thank you for coming on screen. And just a reminder to our audience as well, this will there will be a part 2 that will be available. So encourage folks to also look at part 2 and learn about the work of the Center for Black Educator Development more in detail through that one. Thank you again.
Thank you all again.
Thank you for having us.
opportunity.
We appreciate it.
Yes.
Wonderful.